Why can I not write that word? Oh, I do not know where Mr. Washington is. If he's not in his room, I don't know. Hello. Hello. Is it redundant to say unexpected surprise? Like, aren't all surprises unexpected? Is it redundant to say something was an unexpected surprise?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's the nature of surprises. Today is the 2nd. And if you hear me, not say word, and you show me a sign. Oh. To be moving. Julius is here. I'm so freaking sleepy today. Hello.
Hi.
Is that you in your background?
Yeah, that's me and my boyfriend from the last show.
Nice.
Yeah, he's on the horse. I'm on the ground.
I
Shocking.
figured. I mean, I can kind of tell it's you on the ground. I would have been surprised if it was you on the horse. Let's see. We've got Kayla. We don't yet have Madison, but we'll give her a couple minutes. How's everybody's week going?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Oat milk launches today at Starbucks.
It does?
Yeah.
Kayla, that's the best news you could have given me. I've been waiting so long. Oat milk at Starbucks. Is it everywhere?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled.
It's the brand Oatly.
Okay. I think I've had Oatly. Or am I thinking Oat Planet? I don't know. But every time I've had oat milk at like a different coffee shop, it's good. An oat milk mocha. It's good stuff. That's one of the things I miss so much about being downtown is being able to go to Miller's in the middle of the day and just get an oat milk mocha to go. So nice.
Well, now you can get that at Starbucks.
I can't wait. I'm gonna go to Starbucks later on. Maybe not today, but some morning this week I will. I'm so glad you told me that. I've like looked it up several times over the last few months. Like, when is this happening? Because I just like dairy is upsetting on my stomach a little bit, but that's what I drink anyway. And I just don't really like almond milk. Coconut milk is okay, but oat milk is it's my fave.
Oat milk is too thick for me, so it makes my stomach upset.
That makes sense.
I know.
But it is good.
Yeah, I feel like it's the only one that I can't taste. Like, it doesn't necessarily taste like oats to me. It just tastes creamy and good. But like almond milk tastes like almonds. Coconut milk obviously tastes like coconuts. What is your preferred non-dairy option?
Almond milk. I don't like coconut milk that much. And soy is just
Ugh,
ugh.
no. We don't want soy.
We don't like soy.
Okay, let's get started. And if Madison joins us, then that'll be great. If she doesn't, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like she's at least late a lot, but maybe that she's been absent a good bit too. So I posted a copy of The Illustrated Man, but then it turns out that it's already on D2L and it's like actually sort of a better copy than what
It's pretty.
I put up. So let me share my screen with you guys.
Jeez. This ring?
And sorry, did you say something, Sam?
Oh, no, sorry. I was talking to my grandmother. My bad. My
Oh, no.
my graduation ring just came from Jostin's and I just tried it on.
Your robe? Is that what you said?
No, my ring.
Oh, your ring. Nice.
Yeah. See? Right there. Oh, hold on.
Oh, look at that. Nice.
Woo.
Yeah, I hadn't realized actually. I'm sure y'all all got an email earlier if you check your email. This kid last period was like, "Oh, I never check my email." I'm like, how do you know when you need to do things? But I hadn't realized until yesterday that nobody had like sent out information about when graduation was. I kind of thought that it would be in like a newsletter or something. So I just emailed all of you and your parents earlier today, or like whatever parent or guardian is on the like on Power School. So June 15th, 6 p.m. Charleston Music Hall. Very exciting. And just let me know if you have any questions about it along the way. There will definitely be a lot more information later on about like rehearsal, which will probably be earlier that day. I don't yet know, like year before last when we did a music hall, you could invite as many people as you wanted. I doubt that will be the situation this year just because of COVID stuff, but we'll see. Anyway, we're going to go right here to, this is week 3, part 1, if anybody needs that info. But the whole story is right here. So we're going to read it. And it says prologue, and I've read a few things that say it's the prologue to the Veldt. It's the prologue to the book called The Illustrated Man, and the Veldt is the first story in that. But I wouldn't call it like a prologue to the Veldt. Like, it doesn't really have anything to do with it. But yes, I'm still here. Are you seeing this? Leave me alone. I just clicked on something. Why would you think? This thing's so dumb sometimes. All right. It was a warm afternoon in early September when I first met the illustrated man. Walking along an asphalt road, I was on the final leg of a 2 weeks walking tour of Wisconsin. Late in the afternoon, I stopped, ate some pork, beans, and a donut, and was preparing to stretch out and read when the illustrated man walked over the hill and stood for a moment against the sky. I didn't know he was illustrated then. I only knew that he was tall, once well-muscled, but now, for some reason, going to fat. I recall that his arms were long and the hands thick, but that his face was like a child's set upon a massive body. He seemed only to sense my presence, for he didn't look directly at me when he spoke his first words. Do you know where I can find a job? I'm afraid not, I said. I haven't had a job that's lasted in 40 years, he said. Though it was a hot, late afternoon, he wore his wool shirt buttoned tight about his neck. His sleeves were rolled and buttoned down over his thick wrists. Perspiration was streaming from his face, yet he made no move to open his shirt. Well, he said at last, this is as good a place as any to spend the night. Do you mind company? I have some extra food you'd be welcome to, I said. He sat down heavily, grunting. You'll be sorry you asked me to stay, he said. Everyone always is. That's why I'm walking. Here it is, early September, the cream of the Labor Day carnival season. I should be making money hand over fist at any small town sideshow celebration, but here I am with no prospects. He took an immense shoe and peered at it closely. I usually keep a job about 10 days, then something happens and they fire me. By now, every carnival in America won't touch me with a 10-foot pole. What seems to be the trouble? I asked. For answer, he unbuttoned his tight collar slowly. With his eyes shut, he put a slow hand to the task of unbuttoning his shirt all the way down. He slipped his fingers in to feel his chest. Funny, he said, eyes still shut. You can't feel them, but they're there. I always hope that someday I'll look and they'll be gone. I walk in the sun for hours on the hottest days baking and hope that my sweat'll wash them off. The sun'll cook them off, but at sundown, they're still there. He turned his head slightly toward me and exposed his chest. Are they still there now? After a long while, I exhaled. Yes, I said, they're still there. The illustrations. Another reason I keep my collar buttoned up, he said, opening his eyes, is the children. They follow me along country roads. Everyone wants to see the pictures, and yet nobody wants to see them. He took his shirt off and wadded it in his hands. He was covered with illustrations from the blue tattooed ring about his neck to his belt line. It keeps right on going, he said, guessing my thought. All of me is illustrated. Look. He opened his hand. On his palm, oh, here comes Madison. On his palm was a rose, freshly cut, with drops of crystal water among the soft pink petals. I put my hand out to touch it, but it was only an illustration. As for the rest of him, I cannot say how I sat and stared, for he was a riot of rockets and fountains and people, in such intricate detail and color, that you could hear the voices murmuring small and muted from the crowds that inhabited his body. When his flesh twitched, the tiny mouths flickered, the tiny green and gold eyes winked, the tiny pink hands gestured. There were yellow meadows and blue rivers and mountains and stars and suns and planets spread in a Milky Way across his chest. The people themselves were in 20 or more odd groups upon his arms, shoulders, back, sides, and wrists, as well as on the flat of his stomach. You found them in forests of hair, lurking among a constellation of freckles, or peering from armpit caverns, diamond eyes a-glitter. Each seemed intent upon his own activity. Each was a separate gallery portrait. Why, they're beautiful, I said. How can I explain about his illustrations? If El Greco had painted miniatures in his prime, no bigger than your hand, infinitely detailed, with all his sulfurous color, elongation, and anatomy, perhaps he might have used this man's body for his art. The colors burned in 3 dimensions. They were windows looking in upon fiery reality. Here, gathered on one wall, were all the finest scenes in the universe. The man was a walking treasure gallery. This wasn't the work of a cheap carnival tattoo man with 3 colors and whiskey on his breath. This was the accomplishment of a living genius, vibrant, clear, and beautiful. Oh yes, said the illustrated man. I'm so proud of my illustrations that I'd like to burn them off. I've tried sandpaper, acid, a knife. Ooh. The sun was setting. The moon was already up in the east. For you see, said the illustrated man, these illustrations predict the future. I said nothing. It's all right in sunlight, he went on. I could keep a carnival day job, but at night, the pictures move, the pictures change. I must have smiled. How long have you been illustrated? In 1900, when I was 20 years old and working a carnival, I broke my leg. It laid me up. I had to do something to keep my hand in, so I decided to get tattooed. But who tattooed you? What happened to the artist? She went back to the future, he said. I mean it. She was an old woman in a little house in the middle of Wisconsin, somewhere not far from this place. A little old witch who looked 1,000 years old one moment and 20 years old the next, but she said she could travel in time. I laughed. Now I know better. How did you happen to meet her? He told me. He had seen her painted sign by the road. Skin illustration. Illustration instead of tattoo. Artistic. So he had sat all night while her magic needles stung him wasp stings and delicate bee stings. By morning, he looked like a man who had fallen into a 20-color print press and had been squeezed out, all bright and picturesque. I've hunted every summer for 50 years, he said, putting his hands out on the air. When I find that witch, I'm going to kill her. The sun was gone. Now the first stars were shining, and the moon had brightened like the fields of grass and wheat. Still, the illustrated man's pictures glowed like charcoals in the half-light, like scattered rubies and emeralds, with Rouault colors and Picasso colors, and the long, pressed-out El Greco bodies. So people fire me when my pictures move. They don't like it when violent things happen in my illustrations. Each illustration is a little story. If you watch them, in a few minutes, they tell you a tale. In 3 hours of looking, you could see 18 or 20 stories acted right on my body. You could hear voices and think thoughts. It's all here just waiting for you to look. But most of all, there's a special spot on my body. He bared his back. See? There's no special design on my right shoulder blade, just a jumble. Yes. When I've been around a person long enough, that spot clouds over and fills in. If I'm with a woman, her picture comes there on my back in an hour and shows her whole life. How she'll live, how she'll die, what she'll look like when she's 60. And if it's a man, an hour later, his picture's here on my back. It shows him falling off a cliff or dying under a train. So I'm fired again. All the time he had been talking, his hands had wandered over the illustrations, as if to adjust their frames, to brush away dust, the motions of a connoisseur, an art patron. Now he lay back, long and full in the moonlight. It was a warm night. There was no breeze, and the air was stifling. We both had our shirts off. And you've never found the old woman? Never. And you think she came from the future? How else could she know these stories she painted on me? He shut his eyes tiredly. His voice grew fainter. Sometimes at night I can feel them, the pictures, like ants crawling on my skin. Then I know they're doing what they have to do. I never look at them anymore. I just try to rest. I don't sleep much. Don't you look at them either, I warn you. Turn the other way when you sleep. I lay back a few feet from him. He didn't seem violent, and the pictures were beautiful. Otherwise, I might have been tempted to get out and away from such babbling. But the illustrations, I let my eyes fill up on them. Any person would go a little mad with such things upon his body. The night was serene. I could hear the illustrated man's breathing in the moonlight. Crickets were stirring gently in the distant ravines. I lay with my body sidewise, so I could watch the illustrations. Perhaps half an hour passed. Whether the illustrated man slept, I could not tell, but suddenly I heard him whisper, "They're moving, aren't they?" I waited a minute. Then I said, "Yes." The pictures were moving, each in its turn, each for a brief minute or two. There in the moonlight, with the tiny tinkling thoughts and the distant sea voices, it seemed each little drama was enacted. Whether it took an hour or 3 hours for the dramas to finish, it would be hard to say. I only know that I lay fascinated and did not move while the stars wheeled in the sky. 18 illustrations, 18 tales. I counted them one by one. Primarily, my eyes focused upon a scene, a large house with 2 people in it. I saw a flight of vultures on a blazing flesh sky. I saw yellow lions and I heard voices. The first illustration quivered and came to life. So I do kind of get why they say this would be the prologue to the Veldt, because of that last bit. A large house with 2 people in it, vultures, yellow lions. Weird. This is a weird story anyway. I kind of want more of it. just because I'm like, well, what happens? Does he find the witch? Does he kill her? Was she even real? I don't know. But it's like a kind of creepy. Ray Bradbury loved like dark carnival stuff. In fact, I think he has a book, like a compilation called Dark Carnival. And this is really fitting. And actually, part of it reminded me of one of his most famous books, which he didn't write that many books, like a handful. Mostly he wrote short stories. He wrote like over 600 short stories. One of his most famous books is called Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is a line from Macbeth. And in it, it's like a sort of haunted evil carnival that comes to town, and there's a carousel, and the guy who runs it like jumps on it, and these two little kids who are watching him see him go backwards on the carousel, and he becomes a little boy as he's going backwards. And then like later on, does this sound familiar to you?
Lord of the Thieves.
Lord of the
movie. I'm pretty sure it's originally German,
Oh,
but
it has something like that?
yeah, basically, like it's. I forget where it's set. I think it's Venice.
Huh.
But yeah, and then at the end it has to do with a carousel where if you sit on it, it goes backwards and you come over.
Weird. I'm gonna look
Maybe
that
that's
up.
just like a myth.
Maybe that's a myth. Maybe that's a thing. Like I thought it was a Ray Bradbury thing, but might not be. I'm gonna look into that for sure. But it kind of reminded me of that, and like, bless his heart, I love Ray Bradbury. You all know this, but like, some of his stuff is so weird, and like, he will use the same. The Thief Lord.
Yeah.
Okay. The Thief Lord. It kind of reminded me of that when he was talking about the witch and how she like went back and forth in time. Like he saw her as an old woman. He saw her. I don't actually remember what it said, but I don't know. But this is kind of the same thing. Like, oh, there we go. She looked 1,000 years old one moment and 20 years old the next, but she said she could travel in time. This kind of fits in with like the dark carnival type of thing. He's like sort of like a sideshow freak, more or less. But it also like this is it's a very superficial thing to say, but like he reminded me of Maui from Moana because he's got the moving tattoos. I love that movie. So I hadn't really ever thought before about this being like a prequel. So I'm kind of thinking here. I'm about to start looking at the presentation for today, the lecture, but to be honest, it's a lot of questions and like about the stories, the two stories, and can provoke some discussion. So you know what? I'm like hatching a plan in my head, but let's just see how far we get and we'll see. Okay, so if you guys want to see this later, it's like the thing we're about to look at. It's this, the Illustrated Man in the Veldt questions, but I have it open here. So we're just gonna look at it here. This is not, I feel like of the like lecture things, this is not one of the stronger ones, but it'll be fine. So this is about both stories. The first thing, and I'll be curious to see how you guys think this plays into it, but theme and allegory. So we know that the theme, when we're talking about a theme, what we mean is the insight about a topic communicated in the work, like an overall message that the author wants us to understand. Most works do have several themes. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw this one out there. Like for the Veldt, I feel like the really obvious theme would be something about like not relying too much on technology or like not letting it take over. But I think there might be some other themes in there too. It's usually implicitly communicated rather than explicitly stated. Fables would be an exception to this. So like the tortoise and the hare, it straight up says slow and steady wins the race. Most things, they're not going to come right out and tell you what the theme is. It's something that you kind of have to dig into on your own. So the big question is, what are the stories about and what do they mean? Other than the technology thing, what do you guys think might be a theme of the Veldt? I think so. Something about discipline. Yeah, like not like how to phrase it.
Like it has its place.
Discipline has its place. I like that. Yeah, because obviously like these kids are not disciplined at all, and everything goes horribly wrong because of that. What do you think the theme is for the Illustrated Man?
I don't know. Sounds a lot more less clear.
I agree. Anybody got any ideas? What would a theme be for the Illustrated Man? Maybe something about like knowing what you're getting into before you get into it, because he was sort of just like trying to get by. He was trying to keep a job, and now he's got this like curse on him basically. I think that one is harder. All right, we're gonna move on because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. Allegory is a literary work in which characters, actions, and even settings have two connected levels of meaning. Elements of the literal level signify like a figurative level that often imparts a lesson or a moral to the reader. So for example, I've brought this up before, and I don't remember if it was in this class or in a different class, but there's this book called Pilgrim's Progress, where this character named Christian, it wasn't in this class, it was in English 4 when we were doing morality plays. A character named Christian has to make his way through obstacles like the Valley of Humiliation to get to the Celestial City, and like all these symbols that are just not subtle at all. And it's basically like the story of becoming a Christian. And I mean, the like going through hardships, and like all the characters are named like really specific thing. Like I think there's a character whose name is like Victory or something, but they're all like, it's all really heavy-handed. That's a really blatant allegory. Other ones are less obvious. Like some people, if you don't know better, you can read Animal Farm just as like a story about talking pigs, but we know that it's an allegory for the Russian Revolution. I don't know if we can see either of these stories as allegories. Like I think there's definitely a bigger picture, like particularly with, and I mean, if we know anything about Ray Bradbury, which I think all of you know at least something about him, because you've been in my classes before, that he was very like not anti-technology, but very wary of technology. And like, especially in this day and age where we have so many things that people could never have dreamed of 100 years ago, he kind of predicted a lot of it. Like, I don't know if you guys remember reading Fahrenheit 451, but they kept talking about like the seashells in their ears, and that was basically AirPods, and it's the exact same thing. So I always find it really interesting to see like what people think technology is going to be like in the future. I just finished watching this show where the last season had like 2 alternate timelines, and one of them was like 30 years in the future, and they kept talking about how like cars didn't run on gas anymore. They didn't say what they ran on, but they kept saying that. And like they could talk to everything in their house. Like the girl threw up in the toilet and the toilet spoke to her and was like, unfamiliar substance, analyzing substance. And yeah, like what was in your puke. And like, it's really interesting because I don't know, things might be like that in 30 years. Like, I don't think that we would have thought 30 years ago that everything we need to do would be on our phone. I mean, a phone is used barely as a phone anymore. So while that's not like an event, I feel like the Velt could kind of be allegorical for just like the advent of all this new technology and how far south it could go. Which like, this is sort of like a children's version of Terminator in a way, like machinery becoming sentient and kind of like turning on us. Okay. The Illustrated Man, the point of view of this story, you know, we've got this kind of stranger who just like comes across someone else. I kind of want to look back at it for a minute because, not gonna lie, this is the first time I've read this in a very long time. So at the beginning, it just says that like he was on the final leg of a 2 weeks walking tour of Wisconsin. He stopped and ate some pork and beans and a donut, and he was going to just stretch out and read. And then I feel like all the rest of it is kind of just learning the story of the Illustrated Man, except for like at the very end. Like obviously he is sort of entranced by these illustrations. What? Where is this? They go to sleep. Don't you turn the other way when you sleep? And like they sleep next to each other, but he doesn't pay attention to them, and he does keep watching them. I think that's an interesting, like I don't quite know what to make of that. Like the warning not to watch them. Like, why do you think he warns him not to look at the pictures, the illustrations? Why do you think the Illustrated Man warns the narrator not to look at the illustrations? He's like, turn away from it when you're sleeping. Don't watch them.
Maybe so like he doesn't get drawn in and then sees something that might scare him and completely just force the Illustrated Man away.
Yeah, I think maybe so. Because it sounds like the Illustrated Man has been like sort of haunted by some of the things he's seen on his own skin. Like he talks about the stories about people dying, and like if he meets a woman, it'll show up on his skin, like how she, like what she looks like when she's old and how she dies and all this stuff. And I would imagine that would be kind of like haunting and disturbing to see. And particularly at the end, if it's like kind of giving a preview of the Velt, which we know is very creepy. Like that's a disturbing thing. I think this is interesting. It asks, in what way might the narrator be like Bradbury himself? Any ideas? How might the narrator be like the writer? I just got a good idea. So my thought there, and I feel like you don't have to know a ton about Ray Bradbury to think this, but like a writer, particularly of short stories, is going to be interested in like other people's stories, and this narrator not only like sits there and gets to know the Illustrated Man and listens to his story, but he can't stop himself from looking at these stories unfolding on his skin. So I feel like that kind of similarity of like wanting to be exposed to the stories and being really curious about it is maybe a connection. Okay, so I like that it says possible questions. Like, no, they're questions. Try to explain one of the following. I feel like maybe we could answer all of them. Either George's chewed wallet in the nursery, he finds his own wallet. He finds his wife Lydia's bloody scarf, and then he hears screams that sound familiar. What's that about?
Oh. No. Well, what I thought doesn't make any sense. So.
Okay. Well, it is kind of weird because those things would make sense to be found after, like, after the end of the story. But him, like, finding his own stuff and, like, hearing his and his wife's screams, that's weird.
Yeah, it's kind of just like foreshadowing to their death, even though we don't know. Like with the screams, we don't know whose they are, but they can tell that it's familiar. So it's foreshadowing to some sort of death, something happening to them.
Yeah.
Wait, did you just say that it was the kids imagining the parents dying?
Well, that's not what we said, but
Oh.
like it could be that, like, because they've seen it in their heads. Because I mean, they say several times in the story that, like, if we think it, it shows up on the walls. Like, you think Aladdin, yes, you think Aladdin, and Aladdin shows up on the walls. And so if the kids are thinking about killing their parents or like getting the lions to kill their parents, then maybe that is kind of manifested in the walls until it actually happens. Ooh. So there's sort of this allusion to Peter Pan, because the kids' names are Wendy and Peter. Why do you think they chose those, or like why would Wendy be kind of ironic in this story?
I don't know Peter Pan enough.
You know Peter Pan enough?
I don't know.
Oh my God.
Isn't it about like Wonderland? And when you go to Wonderland, you can dream up whatever you want.
Yes, it is. Neverland.
Neverland, not Wonderland. Whoopsies.
You, exactly. You dream up thing, like basically whatever you want is there. It's like a child's perfect fantasy land. So like having Wendy and Peter be named that really does make sense. I feel like maybe Wendy is kind of ironic because in the story, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Peter Pan, Wendy is on the verge of like becoming a teenager or like being old enough to not stay in the nursery anymore. And she really doesn't want to because she has been like, she enjoys being there and like telling stories about Peter Pan. And Peter Pan is like a kid forever. So I guess it's kind of ironic. It's not like they won't grow up, but like in this story, it's not like they are not going to grow up, but
Well, they just, it's not, well, you could argue that their mental states could be stuck there forever.
I think it's
like the damage that was done.
Yeah, I think it's a very good argument. Julia said you could kind of argue that their mental state might be stuck as kids forever, especially if you consider the fact that they have gotten rid of their parents who like teach them how to be adults, or like that's what they're supposed to do. So it is kind of ironic. So George names the children's creation of the African belt in the nursery Death Thoughts, and muses that they are awfully young for death thoughts. What factors might have produced the death thoughts in the children? Why are they thinking about death so much? And why do they create that place?
Because the parents are taking like parts of the house away, like the painting machine and all that, and they see that if they take their parents out of the equation, then they can have all the stuff back. So
Yeah.
maybe.
I wonder why. Go ahead. Sorry, I feel like I cut you off. I'm wondering like why Africa? Like, why is that the thing that they, and I don't have a correct answer for it or anything, but like, as compared to like, I don't know, why didn't they do, I don't
Well,
know.
did the parents say that they like need to stop watching after the TV show?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they said like a TV show, but they continually make the playroom into Africa. And they're like, let's do something else other than Africa, like have a different thing on the screen. Although it's kind of weird, like there's like an overlap sort of between entertainment and reality there, because they like create this place, and yeah, they could just sit there and watch it like TV, but they also get to be a part of it. It's very weird to think about. Maybe because Africa could seem like cool and playful and even educational, and just like really different from their home, but because they have all these like big scary animals, there's also like an undercurrent of danger there. Okay, what does the story suggest as the source of the children's murderous hatred for their parents? And I think Kenzie touched on this a little bit. But do you think that their parents failed them, or do we blame technology? Is it a combination of those things? What do y'all think?
A combo.
Combo.
It's kind of like the parents. Ooh, the parents thought they were doing what was best for them and the kids, but it turned out that the technology, they just relied on it too much, and the kids just completely didn't even need the parents. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's an important thing. Like all the things that a parent is supposed to do for a child, and those roles that parents are supposed to play, are being played by technology instead. Like that, I think they talked about like the shoe tire, or like all these things that you would just normally do yourself, or that parents would teach their kids to do. It's being taken care of by machines. So it almost like erases the role of a parent. Unless you do those things with your kids, there's not going to be the same kind of bond. Like they're basically just other people in these children's house. They're not like, they don't have a parental role.
I think it's more so the parents' fault. I think they're not a good parents.
I mean, that's fair.
They didn't, not like I would know.
Right, me
Like,
either.
it
But
seems
like,
they didn't know what they were doing, and they were like kind of being lazy. by
Yeah.
that house.
agreed. And I think that's kind of one of the messages about technology, because it does let us be so much lazier. But like what Julius was saying, if y'all couldn't hear him, was that it's more the parents' fault, because they weren't like performing these roles that parents are supposed to, and they just let the technology take over. And ultimately it's their job to do those things for their kids, and they just didn't because they were lazy. And like I said, technology kind of gives us that option, but I feel like we have to be the ones to like decide how much we're going to let technology run our lives, and how much we're going to actually just try to be people. I really think that this is a good story. It's a creepy story, but it's a good story, particularly like nowadays for parents to read, because I feel like it's so easy to just like give your kid a screen and send them off to do their own thing. And yeah, I don't think that like this exact thing is going to happen, but I do think that there's some danger there of like kids relying too much on technology, parents not doing their job as much as they should, like not having a bond as much between parent and kid. And I mean, that's kind of a dangerous place to be. And we're at a place in like the evolution of technology where this is kind of, almost possible. This is not possible, but the basic idea is. Shoot, I hope we have time to watch this little video. This is not really a question, this first one. Was that a thought? Or okay.
I really didn't even realize that.
I thought you were like, I've had a brilliant idea. I didn't realize Madison had left us. The rise in popularity of television had a direct influence on this story. It was written in the 50s, and a lot of Americans were acquiring their first TVs. People didn't know how this new technology would impact the relationships among family members. They thought that watching too much television would lead to the total breakdown of the family unit, and that fear's directly reflected in the story, but it's kind of elevated by having this machine that allows children to detach emotionally from their parents and physically destroy the parents. So we did just kind of say, you know, with this current technologies question, what current technologies create generation gaps? And I did mention like putting your kid in front of a screen so you don't have to deal with them. But can you guys think of anything else, any specific examples of that? What current technologies create generation gaps?
I guess like anything, like your phone, your TV, your computer, your laptop, really just anything.
Yeah, for sure. I actually like recently, this is not really about like parents and kids, but I recently heard from this college professor who said that like when my generation was in college, that was the last time that they felt like students were really physically engaged, because everybody has a screen in front of them now. And it's just really hard to like connect with students when you have this screen between you. And I get that, especially like this year, I totally get that, because it's so much harder to connect with people who are only on Zoom than it is to connect with people who are here in the building. And I mean, like, unfortunately, that's beyond our control right now, but you know, it sucks, and I get what they're saying. Do we have time? Let's just ask this last question, and then we'll do the other thing later on. What concerns do parents have today about their children, and are those concerns legitimate? What concerns do parents have today about their children? And
That they're becoming too reliant on technology, and they're just spending all their time on like watching dumb stuff on like YouTube or something, and not going outside and like actually being a child and learning how to use like everyday skills.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if you guys will remember from AP last year, but one of the synthesis essays we did was about the dumbest generation, and about how like we looked at all these sources about how people under 30 were the dumbest generation because they had everything available to them. Like they didn't have to learn anything. They just had to look stuff up. And we've just done that one in my AP class this year, and it has some of the students said really good things about how like that doesn't necessarily mean that you're dumber. It just means you have a different type of intelligence, or that you've kind of adapted things, or like adapted the way you learn because of technology. And I think that's fair to say. Hi. They have concerns about online communication, and they're getting dumber. Yeah, exactly. I don't know that I think that that's necessarily true, that they're getting dumber. I feel like lazier maybe, but I don't know that I think dumber. Okay, the last thing I think we're gonna wait on. I did not find this thing, the authors on their work. I looked for it and couldn't find it, but I found a video clip of him talking about this, and I think I'd rather just hold off and talk about that later. I may kind of move some stuff a little bit, like no due dates. I won't move any due dates. Hey, a key? Yeah. I won't move any due dates, but I might just move like what day we do a few things, because we're moving through this one pretty quickly. But also I'm not going to be here on Tuesday, a week from today. So I might just like shift a couple things. But that's it for today. Tomorrow we'll do the prompt in class?
James Canning, please report to your class immediately.
Woo!
James Canning, please report to your class.
Ah, James in trouble. I don't know. Where's he supposed to be? Oh no, that one's Madison. That's Kinsey, Isaiah, Kayla. Yeah. Wash isn't here. He's just asking.
It's 3:00.
Thank you. Where's James?
Thanks for,
Oh yeah, of course. Of course, of course. But I will see you guys tomorrow.
Bye.